let's start when it comes to our excavation trip here through the
Mm,
lineup data. Let's start with the nice things, the Jokic lineups. Okay. The first lineup I want to talk about is the main starters. So
okay.
that is Jamal, Christian, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, and Jokic. This unit has played 232 possessions together, even with AG's absence, still one of the most used lineups in the NBA. Point 0.9 net rating, which is absurd.
Pretty good.
136.2 offensive rating, 117 defensive rating. And my main question for you when it comes to this lineup, Ryan, is one, why have the starters ended up being molten lava on offense this year, especially when everyone thought if they're going to be the same or better than last year, it's probably going to be defensively because of Christian's defensive versatility, but they'll probably lose some spacing without KCP. Complete opposite has happened. Is particularly sustainable given a well below average defensive rating for this lineup that would actually rank just do some quick maths here. That defensive rating would be last in the NBA this year for the starters.
Yeah, so you're looking at the one that has 118 minutes. It's only played 5 games. I'm looking at it on NBA.com.
Oh, I
Um,
got this from Cleaning the Glass. So
okay.
I've got possessions. I've got 200 possessions.
I'll
Probably
go to cleaning the glass
oh, you
too.
got it
Let me
right.
let
Okay.
me let me navigate my way over there. I also am a subscriber and then love what cleaning the glass does and makes people smarter. And
They make
that's
pretty charts
yes,
and
they do.
just give me lots of data to dig into at my leisure to push certain agendas and and whatnot.
I like this number because on NBA.com it's plus 14.9. So plus
Okay.
18.9 when you
Even
eliminate
better.
garbage
Yeah.
time is better.
Yeah.
I big fan. So yeah, 97th percentile on offense, 18th percentile on defense. Uh, I think that in general, when you're talking about a lineup that has Murray, Brown, Porter, Gordon, and Jokic, there are going to be specific types of players that impact that lineup defensively. That like the quick guards are going to be difficult for Denver
Yeah.
to
That's been
handle. Some like some centers that are able to pick and pop is going to be an issue because Jokic is going to like to hang back in the paint or he's going to blitz. Those are going to be the two main coverages that Denver deals with. So Denver is actually going to get a really good test on that against New York when Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns come to town. So I'm curious to see how they handle it and if like I don't know if everybody's going to be back during that time. Like Aaron Gordon, I think has an outside chance of being back by that point. Jokic, he'll make the offensive lineups look really good. He has the greatest impact offensively in cleaning the glass history at this point. Like with
yeah.
what he's doing, his numbers look absolutely bonkers when you look at any offensive lineup that includes him. But the one below that too, that doesn't include Gordon and instead includes Peyton Watson.
Yeah.
Does that say 148.4
That
offensive
is
rating?
correct.
That's that I'm reading that correctly. That is very impressive, and it just goes to show that like once you get the formula down for hey, you get the 2-man game, but you get the spacing, you get the running, you get the athleticism, you get the transition, like everything starts to look pretty good.
It's been a lot less two-man game, even to close these games, or at least in the way that we're used to in terms of the spread pick and roll. But we saw versus in the Toronto game in Toronto, they closed in regulation with operating off of an empty side, and Jamal was able to make that reverse layup on that last possession to tie the game. But we haven't been seeing as much super effective spread pick and roll. And I think they've gone away from it a bit because of that. And it hasn't been as effective, I think, because of the spacing for Jamal. But these lineups are still kicking ass.
Yeah, like
So
hey,
that's my question is like what's going on here? Is it because AG and now and Christian also have been shooting well at least on average over a 50% from 3? Um can that explain everything with like these particular lineups? And like again, like how worried are you like that defensively these lineups are like kind of trash?
they're kind of trash, but I also sort of feel like Denver's still surprisingly like 11th in
Yeah.
defense on the season, and it's still pretty early in terms of
They're climbing up there.
what to
I use
do.
dunks and threes because I like, especially early in the season, trying to adjust for schedule. And Denver has been slowly climbing up there. They were 22nd at one point, and then they were like hovering at 19th for a few games. Now they're at 14th. I think the last two Memphis games have really helped that because the Grizzlies haven't really been able to score that well.
Yeah,
Um, they can't shoot. But before
exactly.
that, it was looking really, really rough.
In terms of Denver's offense, I'm just looking at some numbers here. They're shooting 44.5% basically on corner threes, 6% higher than the rest of the NBA. And I think if you look at Denver's roster and look at who they have, you don't really expect that to hold. It's
Yeah.
only 83 shots, so it's not like it's going to
Yeah.
be this massive effect. And what
Right. They
Denver
don't take
mostly
a lot
does
of
is in the
corner
middle of
threes.
the floor and on cuts and on above the break threes. Like they shot 83 corner threes so far and 365 above the break threes. So like that's actually no, that's Dallas. Excuse me. They've shot 330
Yeah.
above the break threes. So this is like they're going to be fine as long as they keep hitting threes. But that's one of the factors here is that you have to understand is that Aaron Gordon, he was hotter than the sun at the beginning of the season before getting hurt. I don't expect him to shoot above 40% going forward. And I don't really expect Christian Brown to shoot above 40% going forward. I think that that'll come down eventually and into that like 36 to 38 range. But I also kind of expect Jamal to be a lot better shooting the ball than Mike is who he is. What about Nikola? Where do you expect his 3-point shooting to be at?
Not at 56%.
What? What?
I
Grace.
think he'll probably end up somewhere around because the shot like looks a lot more comfortable. I think that he's actually worked on the base. It's a lot more consistent
Yeah.
now. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up somewhere between, I'll be generous and say 38 to 42% from three. But he's shooting like crazy right now.
Yeah, that certainly helps shooting higher than what he normally shoots as well. Dario's lower, so maybe he comes up a little bit. Peyton's higher, so like I don't know if that's player development or if that's like shooting above his standard. Julian Strawther, I think, was like 38% at this point. So that's about where I would expect him to be based off of the kind of shooter that people think that he is. I don't know whether he's actually that or not, but some of the threes that he was hitting look pretty pure.
Yeah. This road trip for sure where we had a lot of everybody breaking really, but particularly I think it hurt with Christian because he was actually he'd been making so many
Yeah.
that dropped us from second in 3-point percentage as a team to 6. Obviously also not without Jokić, our best 3-point shooter
Yeah.
on the team as well. But
Here's
it would be nice if they could hover around that like 7 to 4 range
yeah. Here's
in
another
terms of
factor I'll
efficiency.
say is the free throw shooting.
Yes. Yeah.
It's something that Denver's never once had under the Jokic era, where like you could say, oh yeah, we're getting to the free throw line and we're making enough free throws to really make it count. Now they're only 20th in percentage right now, just on the season, but and that to me is more indicative of what they are as a 3-point shooting team, if I'm
Mm.
being honest. So we'll see whether
They were
whether
better. They were an awful free throw shooting team last year, though, and they were kind of a slightly above average 3-point.
yeah,
Uh,
so like I mean, I think that they'll eventually get to kind of below average in both of those categories. But if they can make up for it in some volume, like you're
mm,
getting to the free throw line is way more important than how many you're actually making. So
yeah.
I do think that like they're fourth in attempts, they're third in makes. They're doing a really good job of like the in terms of free throw rate, they are sixth, and so like that's something that they've never had before. And like Jokic especially is affecting some of those things. He is helping them get to the free throw line, whether that's Christian Brown crashing on cuts, whether that's Michael Porter ducking in, whether that's Jokic himself just getting fouled on putbacks, things like that. Like there's a lot to like about what the team is doing from a free throw shooting perspective, and I think that's really helping them surprisingly much.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. That was never like they were. I mean, last year, I just want to grab this because the free throw rate skyrocketed this year. Last year, they were 25th in free throw rate. And up until this road trip, they were first.
Yeah.
So I think Jokic coming back and the offense kind of getting back to what it was will probably get that back up. I think the fact they're playing with so much pace and how Russ is pushing pace and all that in transition too is a big part of it.
Undoubtedly.
Just getting more opportunities to catch defenses off out of position.
And like Jokic loves to push that tempo. Like he'll throw the ball ahead as often as he
Yeah.
possibly. That to me is perfectly understandable. But he carries a heavy burden, and anytime that Denver can get some free throws and slow that game down, but play fast while the game is going on, like that is the right pacing that they should be trying to achieve.
So we talked about the lineup where Peyton is in for AG while he's been out with his calf strain. Another lineup that they played a lot while Jamal was in his concussion protocol was basically the starters without Jamal. So Russ in there for that point guard spot. Or was it one game? I guess it was the second half of the Wolves game because Jamal got the concussion early, and then the Jazz game. That lineup is a plus 32.2 in 71 possessions. The part that I wanted to highlight about it was the 88.9 defensive rating. Now it's not even 100 possessions, and most of the lineups that we're talking about um, won't have that much burn, especially because of how much the starters play together, and also how much various starters have been out. But this one really stood out to me because Russ is a completely different kind of player than the Jamal, and you can kind of see that in the strength of this unit is really more on the defense, even though the offense is still really good. What do you make of that, and that being a potential tool, not just as the season goes on, but potentially even in the playoffs? Because I've been racking my brain trying to figure out which of the data on Russell Westbrook I actually trust.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one, and I'm looking at the one right below it that includes Peyton instead of AG.
Yes,
And I'm
yes.
thinking back to those moments and what Denver was actually doing. There are some good moments where Russ was, I think, against the Timberwolves, like immediately replacing Jamal in those moments. AG was still out there. Denver was running that. I think they closed with that group at one point. They also did it against the Jazz, which I mean, it's hard to really take too much lineup data against the Jazz that seriously. And then it was for the first few minutes against Toronto. So I don't know how much to value that in a small sample.
Yeah,
Not all of it came from those games. And I think that the ones with Peyton, which it looks drastically different, right?
drastically.
It looks like so you've got the minus minus
16.
16.2
That's right.
in those minutes on basically the same number of possessions. So I think it's probably somewhere in the middle of those two samples. It's probably like a plus 16, a plus 15 that they can go to. And like because I think we saw that with Denver last year where they had Reggie and Christian come in, and then you had Mike, AG, and Jokic, I believe. And that lineup last year was really good in kind of the middle to end of the first and third quarters. And like that was a surprising one that they're really propped up Reggie's plus minus in particular. So
Mhm.
it's just those looks where you get that nice little change up right in the middle of the first and third quarter that I
Right.
think Denver can definitely go to. And like they should try that. They should absolutely do it.
So just to your point about the difference when it's Peyton, I was trying to figure out about like what is the difference between the good lineups with Russ and the bad ones in terms of net rating.
Mm.
Um, so Russ with Peyton is in terms of a two-man pairing is minus 18 net in 371 possessions. So it's pretty big sample size.
Yeah.
Without Jokic, it's obviously worse, minus 25.3 in 215 possessions. Well, Jokic fixes a lot. Jokic has actually been able to make, even we're about to talk about this, the 2 point guard look, at least okay. Without Jokic, or sorry, with Jokic, Russ and Peyton is at 156 possessions. And I was trying to find lineups that had Russ and Peyton together that were positive or near positive. And the only one that had even 10 possessions together was Jokic, Peyton at the 4, Julian, Christian, and Russ. And it was literally like 10 possessions.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. And the reason for that is like I remember those looks. It was I think they used it in the OKC game. I think they used it in the
Mm,
Clippers game, like the first two games of the season, where
yeah.
Denver was trying to figure out what basketball was again. That was a pretty ugly time for the Nuggets. The offensive rating on that one is pretty
Do,
bad.
do you think we'll just get a bigger sample and maybe perhaps unfortunately confirmation of that pairing being bad once AG is back and Peyton has moved back to the bench? Because right now, obviously, I think a lot of people talked about how Christian and Peyton would both receive a positive benefit from Christian moving to the starting lineup because you have less of their minutes together where they're operating in kind of like similar areas on the floor
Yeah.
most of the time. And Christian's obviously playing a lot more on the perimeter now anyway. But now with AG out, you're separating Peyton and Russ a little bit more too. We even saw in the game yesterday, Malone ends up subbing Peyton out for Russ at the end of the game. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I understood
You know why.
what he was going for.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
part of it was because he was setting the table really well on the offensive end, and then the ball
Yeah.
just ended up in Jamal's hands anyway. Which that's funny. But they got the 10th rebound. That was important. Jokic, one of Mike or Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Russell Westbrook, Julian Strawther. Like those three off the bench, and then one starter, and
Yeah.
then Jokic. I think that will end up being a really good group for Denver for them to go to on a consistent basis.
It was
Uh,
just really rough in the first two games.
yes, absolutely. And so
Versus
like
two really good defensive teams. Like everyone thought the Clippers were going to suck this year, but I said they'd be a good defensive team, and they were, and they really gave Denver a lot of issues, particularly in the first half of that game. And obviously OKC was like, let's be generational.
they're by far the best defensive team in the NBA right now. The Clippers are seventh, but by
The
the
Magic
like
are
when
catching up. I just want to point that out.
oh yeah,
Now
hey,
that Chet is out.
look at that, look at that. They can still do it, but no, I think in general there's always when I'm doing the lineup stuff, there's always problems with small sample size that you have
Yeah.
to continue to ask your question.
Yeah.
Okay, do I actually think that this is going to sustain? What are some factors on both sides that could really be affecting things in one way or the other? And what is most likely to continue to happen? And so I think that with Denver, Russ is now starting to figure out how to fit in with this group a little bit more. Jokic is obviously Jokic. I can consider him probably continuing to be Jokic. And I just think that Peyton Watson has turned a corner.
The other set of lineups that we really have to talk about because they were instrumental in getting Denver what I think was their best win of the season versus OKC, but they played in other games as well, was these no point guard looks,
Mm.
particularly where you have Jokic and MPJ and what have been dubbed the Booth Boys by Nuggets Nation in Christian Brown, Julian Strawther, and Peyton Watson. So that particular pairing where it's Jokic and MPJ with those guys,
Mm.
plus 54.5 and only 44 possessions. The reason that I find this sustainable, or at least close to it, like I think this is going to be a really good lineup, not necessarily like molten lava, because I have a 154
Yeah,
offensive
that
rating.
seems pretty good.
Um, is in watching the games versus the Heat and the Thunder. Actually, not the Heat, but the Thunder and the who
Raptors,
we
right?
played before, the Raptors, yeah. Is where we saw a lot of these lineups. Uh they were so good defensively and they rebounded really well. And it was just like a pretty big lineup, even though you don't have AG out there. I'm actually curious what this would look like with AG there instead of MPJ because the spacing definitely changes, or maybe AG instead of Julian if you want to, keep MPJ on the floor.
Ooh,
But then you lose a
Christian
different kind of
Brown,
ball handler. It's
Christian Brown, Peyton Watson,
so
Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon, Jokic.
Christian's he's been playing point in those looks, and then the offense was basically Jokic post ups, Christian cutting from the cutting in from the weak side to open up that space. Will did a really great video video on Christian slot cutting in that series and how you could uh in that series of possessions versus OKC and how you can deal with limited spacing on the floor where you have Christian and Peyton as non-shooters in that look. But defensively, they were just excellent. And, this is another example of Christian or Peyton's defensive versatility. They were doing a lot of Peyton on Chet, Peyton switching onto SGA, um, to just like muck everything up for the other team. Now, my question here, even though I believe that this is going to be a really effective lineup, is it too early to do the victory lap on the Booth boys because it's so few possessions? Or do you believe in like what I see with in terms of the eye test here?
Hmm. I think everybody's going to look really good with Jokić.
Yeah,
That's one thing that we have to fully understand
for
about
sure.
this. But in particular, Christian is somebody that people should be doing a victory lap on right now. Julian Strother, there's still some things to worry about. There's still some things to think about. Peyton Watson, 2-point shooting actually hasn't been that effective. So that's something that I'm thinking about and trying to figure out, okay, where does he fit into this on the offensive end? How does he continue to attack and stay engaged if the three-pointer is not falling? So that's something that I'm still monitoring and still is a potential barrier in the playoffs. But
Yeah.
I do think that Christian in particular, like he's going to play, like he's going to play 30 plus minutes a night in the playoffs. And anybody that
He's
said that,
playing 30 plus minutes a night now.
yeah,
It's
I
like
mean, that's what I'm
40
saying. It's
minutes
like
some
he's
games.
35, 38, 40. Like the dude has been a metronome. He's been a rock for Denver, and he's been very stable. And like that, I didn't think that he would be the second most consistent player on the team, but here we are.
Yeah, for better or worse.
Like,
It's not great
yeah,
reasons, but
that's fair.
it's good that he has been that.
Yes, like it
Um
saved them a lot.
the one I wanted to point out was actually a different rollout of Jokic with the Booth boys where you've got Russ in instead of MPJ. This lineup only had 35 possessions and it's a plus 1.8. Um so, not as kill you. The defensive rating is pretty good. The
Yeah.
offensive rating is mediocre. I just wondered what you thought of that difference. Again, small sample size, but it's interesting how big of a difference it makes to have, obviously Russ out there over your starting small forward in FPJ.
Yeah, definitely part of it. Um, I look at the EFG. They're not making a bunch of shots there. I look at the free throw rate. They're
Yeah.
53.8% free throw rate with that. That's insane. Propping it up a little bit. So
Okay.
I would say that
Probably.
probably not something that I would go to on a consistent basis and feel really good about. But that doesn't mean that it can't
Another
happen.
Russ plus Peyton lineup, actually, now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah, I
it.
mean that's one sort of kind of rhythm that you're going to have to figure
Interesting.
out. Is are they going to be able to impact things? Now, I will say that if Christian is shooting, if Julian is shooting, and those guys are accurate and players that the team has to respect, they're obviously going to respect Jokic. So Russ and Payton could probably get away with it. You don't always need 4 or 5 shooters in every lineup. Like
No, definitely
that's
not.
definitely something that the Nuggets can figure out, and especially like with the way that Russ is now starting to cut off of Jokic, that can free some things up too. So I don't necessarily think it's impossible that lineup can work, but I'm seeing some danger signs.
Yeah.
That's something that I would monitor.
I do want to just point this out because I think it's relevant and it's not to pick on Russ. It's really more about Russ's fit with some of these best lineups. Like if we're in terms of trying to maximize some of these players. So I have just a list of the best two-man net ratings on the team. Unsurprisingly, Jokic and Jamal plus 19.4. Crazy. Jokic and Christian plus 15.6, Jokic and MPJ plus 18.8. And a lot of those are like those guys playing with multiple other starters.
Yeah.
Um, Jokic and Peyton is actually a plus 14.4. And Peyton's been playing a lot more in the starting lineup recently. But Jokic plus Peyton without Russ is a plus 36.4.
Something
Then
to monitor.
Jokic and Julian is plus 7. And Jokic and Julian without Russ is plus 13.6.
Hmm. I will have to keep an eye on that. That's something that I do think that the end of that Toronto game where they went on a great run and it looked awesome and everybody's cheering and
Mhm.
yay. That's definitely something where you play that out multiple times, and you play out multiple situations against better teams. Like, what is
Yeah,
Toronto's record even? Like, it's probably
right.
not that good. I do think
It's
that
not. They're tied with the Sixers for the worst record in the NBA, I
oh,
believe.
what a shame, Philly. But no, I do think that if Denver were to play that lineup against Boston, it probably goes a little bit differently. And
Boston is definitely a different beast.
yeah, but like fortunately there aren't that many Bostons or OKCs or teams like that out there. So Denver can get away with it against most teams. They just have to
Yeah.
it may not be awesome going forward.
If you like our content, please remember to hit the like button. Please subscribe and share our show. We're trying to grow the channel. Hit the notification bell as well so that you can stay updated on all of our content. Leave us a review if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music. And even if you're not, you guys should head over there and give us a 5-star review anyway. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at What's in a Game NBA. We have our new I still have it listed as a new clip channel, but it's been around at What's in a Game NBA Clips. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.